What a fantastic vehicle. Just the seat alone is splendid. But tell us more about this one.
Well, this is from the second year of Vauxhall production, so this is 1904. It's called a 6 HP light car.
Right, okay.
So it had exactly 1 horsepower more than the previous year.
Okay.
With a 5 HP light car.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good. That's a 20% increase.
Well, exactly, yeah. So still not a very quick car. Can probably achieve around about 23, 24 miles an hour. But this car is significant because it has done the London to Brighton veteran car run more times than any other car in the history of the run. So the run started with the RAC in 1927. Yeah. And since then, this car has done it approximately 55, maybe 56 times.
Fantastic.
And so it only stopped for the Second World War.
Yeah.
And a couple of strikes in the 70s down at the Luton plant. But apart from that, it's been every year.
Brilliant.
And it also has an amazing hit rate. I think it's only failed once, and that was due to driver error. But it's always made it down to Brighton, apart from that one time.
Might I ask what the error was?
Well, it's you basically run this car on its ignition.
Yes.
So that's almost it's part of the performance pack of the car is the little lever just there.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the advanced retard.
Right.
In the ignition. And if you keep it on advance, the temptation is to advance it all the time and make it go as fast as it can, but it also overheats the engine and stretches it. And that's exactly what happened. It boiled over and they couldn't get it started again. So that was the one time it failed. That was about 20 years ago. So
basically, this car has to be eased along, nursed along, don't push it too hard, and it will get you there.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Does it have an epicyclic gearbox?
It does. It's a 2-speed epicyclic gearbox, which is the knurled, the lever there. The knurled knob on the end is the throttle. Because it's called a throttle because it's you have to throttle it back. It starts on full throttle and you throttle it back. Ah, okay. So a very different driving experience to anything later than perhaps the mid-1900s. Absolutely, yes. It's. I always say that actually somebody who's never driven a modern car will be able to pick this up a lot quicker because you don't have to kind of reconfigure the way you drive a car. I see what you mean. And actually, I suppose this was built for people who were used to a combination of horse-drawn vehicles and watercraft. Exactly, yes. And hence the tiller. The tiller, because Vauxhall Ironworks, before it became a motor manufacturer, it used to produce steam engines for the pleasure craft on the Thames. The motor launches. Yeah. Brilliant. So tiller was natural progression. Yeah, absolutely so. What a fantastic vehicle. Right, let's move on to the next one in the series. All right. So Simon, I now have to admit to you that I have previous with this car, and you know that I have previous with this car because you were kind enough to lend it to us a few years ago when we were filming. Now, I have to say that I love this car. This is my favourite Vauxhall of all time. Not only that, it's probably my favourite car of all time. So this is a 1926 OE model Vauxhall 3098, and it is probably one of the most splendid machines on the roads anywhere in the world. But really, I need you to tell me more about the history of this car and the story of the 3098. Okay. Well, to start with, we have something in common because it's my favourite Vauxhall and it is also my favourite car in the whole world. Oh, there we go. So right. Oh no, we're going to have a fight. This car is quite special. It's been owned by Vauxhall since 1948. Yeah. And it was bought in and given to the apprentices as a project car to get back on the road again. And this is when 3098s were tuppence halfpenny. Wow. O2 have been alive there. Exactly. Yes. And we've had it in the collection ever since. It was last restored, recommissioned, whatever, in 1964. And since then, other than general maintenance, it hasn't really had any works done on it at all. So it has a lovely patina, shall we say.
It does,
it's
yeah.
Not perfect, but it is, what we have done is maintained its originality.
Yes.
So it's a matching numbers car, that goes without saying.
Yep.
But, so for example, a lot of 3098s, they have their front axles replaced because the brakes are woeful. They were back in the day. They didn't really match the performance of the car. I mean, this is, even as this car is here, it's in its standard form, it's an 85 mile an hour car, but
yes.
with the right bodywork, a 3098 could achieve 100 miles an hour. So with pared down bodywork,
yep.
aero screens, etc., and a different final drive ratio, you'd certainly be looking at a 100 mile an hour car. And it was the first 100 mph production car in the UK.
Brilliant. So what's not to love about that? Straight out of the showroom, you could be going at 100 miles per hour exactly. On the 1920s streets. If you could find a road that would allow you to do that, even which would have been pretty rare in those days. So, but that's one of the reasons why I find this car so appealing, because even in the 1960s and to some extent in the 1970s, ordinary saloon cars that people could buy out of a showroom still were unable to get anywhere near 100 miles per hour. It wasn't until really the 1980s and 90s that everyday cars became capable of that sort of speed. Right. So this car was a good 60 years ahead of its time in that respect. Yeah. And it's just such a lovely thing. I mean, now what I can't sell without looking, does this one have front wheel brakes as well?
It does have, I think from about 1924, 25, you had front wheel brakes. So it's what we call a contraption called the kidney box, which sits at the front of the car.
Yes.
So we say four-wheel brakes, allegedly four-wheel brakes. In terms of the braking performance, actually all the work, if I drive it, I just use the outside lever which operates the drums on the back. So
the service brake, the general service brake for this car, as I remember, is that lever.
It is
just operating the rear brakes.
Exactly. And the foot brake, which sits on the right of the trio of pedals.
So hold on, the foot brake sits on the right.
Yes.
So the accelerator's in the centre.
Correct.
Okay. So
yeah. You just have to adjust the way you.
Yeah, we're still just before the era of standardisation of pedal layout and control layout and stuff. Yeah. So people were still forging their path and so Vauxhall was still saying at that time, well, central accelerator is the way to go.
And it was immediately after this with the T-Type that we reverted to a conventional the pedal layout we'd be familiar with today.
Yeah.
But this one, so the brake actually operates a prop brake and also the brakes on the front axle.
So hold on, so a brake on the prop shaft. Now,
yes.
If anybody has ever driven a Land Rover and has tried doing so, a series type Land Rover, or maybe even an early 90, and has tried putting on the handbrake while going along, it's something you only generally do once.
Exactly. Well, I've only ever used it in emergency. I've driven about 25,000 miles in this car.
Yes.
And I've probably used that in anger probably twice, 2 or 3 times when people have pulled out in front of me. And everything, it basically locks, as you would imagine, locks the rear axle up because it's locking the prop.
Yep.
And you start to go sideways, but it does the job. If it really needs to be. But generally the rule is anticipate, look a mile ahead and steer clear of traffic and just use the rear brake. Yeah,
right, okay. Well, that is that's a good lesson for anybody who ever should get behind the wheel of this beautiful motor car. It's amazing. It's a beautiful colour. As you said, the patina is absolutely wonderful. There's nothing that I don't like about this car. Maybe there is one thing. It's not mine. Come on.
I feel the same. The same.
Right, we're going to leap ahead now, quite a few decades, to the 1960s. So let's go and see a car that, I'll admit, during my childhood, I didn't give these things a second look. Let's go and have a look at a Vauxhall Victor FB. I'm going to tell Simon something now, and that is I'm not a great big fan of these Victors. Sorry, Simon, I'm not a massive fan of these Victors. I need you to persuade me otherwise, because I remember these when I was a boy as being the slightly stodgy, slow, old cars that the slightly elderly bloke up the road would have, and they'd have little rust holes in the top of the wings and stuff like that. I can see that this one is splendidly preserved, and it comes with all bells and whistles. It's got a Webasto roof, it's got a leather interior. I never saw one specced out like this. So tell me why I should love this car.
Well, I think the FB, Fuzz, is the sweet spot of the Victor range, I suppose, going from the F-Type, which preceded this, right up to the FE in the late 70s. But the F-Type was it was a product of its time. It was very 1950s, quite not particularly advanced. But then the FB came along, and it was a complete departure. Suspension, the chassis, and everything. It was very, very advanced for its day.
So was it pretty much all new?
It was a completely all new chassis. It was a completely new frame. Engine was 1500cc. This one has the optional 4 on the floor.
Okay,
They will come with a 3-speed or a 4-speed.
Well, that's it. I remember them as 3-speed column change.
Yeah.
And there was always this plunge between second and third gear, or so it seemed to my ears.
Yeah. But this one it really feels quite modern to drive. I've driven many, many miles in it. We've taken it across the Alps before on some of our classic car runs, and it performs exceptionally well. It's quite light. This is a personal thing, very subjective, but I like the styling. It's not. It's very neat. It's very lovely, precise lines along the side of the car.
There are a lot of lines along the side of this car.
Exactly. But this was the car that, if you're familiar with Bill Blydenstein, that great Vauxhall tuner from the 60s and the 70s, this is where the FB was the car he took, the very first Vauxhall he took and tuned and developed it for touring cars.
So that was in its VX 490.
Exactly, yeah. So in '63, he drove his first prepared FB VX 490 at Goodwood in the St Mary's Trophy. So it's always been a car which is handled very well. You go to the FC, the 101, which actually took the same platform, but it had this far bigger body, and it didn't offer that much more space inside. And yet it was a bigger body, so it was heavier, it was slower. It didn't handle quite as sweetly.
So it was a styling exercise.
Exactly, yeah. So it never really kind of cut it like the FB did.
So hold on then, if we go back to the VX 490 and its development as a quick competition car, that perhaps is the genesis of modern quick Vauxhalls that ran all the way through the 80s, 90s, 2000s. Yes. So that's the point at which Vauxhall took its perhaps humble saloon cars and allowed them to be turned into something else. So wolves in sheep's clothing, really.
Yes, very much so. And I mean, the VX 490, you didn't have it on the F-Type, obviously, but with the FB, the FC, the FD, and the FE, they all had VX 490 versions.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of pre-VXR line of performance saloons that Vauxhall did during the 60s and 70s. Yes, you're quite
right. Well, I like it a little bit better now.
Thank you.
Come on then, let's move on. Should we go to the 1970s?
Why not?
Come on then. So here we are with the famous Droop Snoot Vauxhall Forenza HPF.
Yes.
So now I remember these as being, sort of really desirable cars in the mid-70s. Now I know that a lady up the road used to have a Magnum with a Droop Snoot Magnum, which to me was a fabulous looking car, and yet its humble origins in the Viva are clear to be seen.
Yes.
So really, this is a monstrously over-engined Vauxhall Viva.
Well, yes, when you think about it, I mean, this was actually, its origins come from the 1966 HB.
Yeah.
So that's the basic platform, and that became the HC platform.
Yeah.
And then, of course, this is based on the HC Viva as a Forenza, and then as the HPF, the Droop Snoot.
Yeah.
So it uses the 2.3 litre slant form, but in this iteration, it has it's got hand polished combustion chambers, basically some head work done on it, and it liberates another 21 horsepower.
Okay, so that's quite a heavy lump of an engine in there.
Yeah.
And I always seem to think that at 4 cylinders for 2,300cc, it was kind of pushing the envelope. Although at the time I didn't know about sort of pre-war Bentleys and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and Vauxhall 3098s and so on and so forth, which had huge engines comparatively with just 4 cylinders. But now, I think that these cars, you know, now that I have the benefit of age, these cars look like they're moving when they're standing still.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of them, I think.
But that engine, despite the fact that it was large capacity, only 4 cylinders, it imbued it with a lot of torque.
Yeah.
It has a 5-speed gearbox. So actually today, compared with a lot of 70s cars, you take it on the motorway and it's got quite a relaxed gate. You could sit at 70 miles an hour without it, you know, the engine thrashing around.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the whole project was flawed because the original intention was to build 1,000 of these.
Yes.
But of course, then the fuel crisis struck almost immediately.
Of course.
As soon as it was launched, 1973, fuel crisis struck, and only 204 cars were built.
I see. And I don't think people quite realise that the fuel crisis reintroduced petrol rationing.
Yes, that's right, it did.
So actually, it wasn't just a matter of petrol being expensive, it was getting enough fuel to actually make it through the week.
Yeah.
And that's really what made these cars and others undesirable at the time.
Yes, that's right.
Wow. Well, look, it's a great survivor, but now it's time to move on to the 1980s. So now we come to the 1980s, and it's the Mark I Astra GTE. Now, this is the Golf Mark I GTI killer. It spanks the Golf's bottom. People think that this car is the lesser car out of those two. It's not, though. I know from first-hand experience that this is a quicker and in a lot of ways a better car, a better machine. So tell me about this.
Well, you're right. Obviously, I'm about to say that, but we were late to the game. So we had the ability, I think, as Vauxhall to kind of sit back, see what the competition was doing, and then 1983, we launched this car. So a few years after the GTI, 205 GTI, certainly a long time after the Golf GTI, and also the XR3. But this was very sophisticated product when it came out, 1.8 litre fuel-injected engine, and really, you know, standalone looks. I mean, nothing else looked like the Astra GTE.
Yeah. Now, can I at this point, can I interject and say I prefer the styling of the Mark I to the Mark II? Is that a bad thing to say?
No, and I have to say I'm with you there.
Yeah,
absolutely. And of course, this car would have been built 20 minutes from here
at Ellesmere Port.
At Ellesmere Port.
Wow.
So yeah, they were very proud. The guys were very proud up there when this came into the market, and when we could start producing this. But very easy performance figures to remember on this.
Yeah.
So it produced 115 horsepower.
Right.
115 pounds-foot of torque.
Okay.
Weighed a ton, so you had your 115 bhp per ton.
Yep.
115 pounds-foot of torque per ton.
Yeah.
And then it would achieve 115 miles an hour maximum speed.
It's almost as if it was designed
Exactly.
in. So why is it not the Astra 115?
Oh, well, that's a very good question.
It's just a rubbish name, isn't it? Yeah. GTE is far better. Right, okay, so this is a real iconic car in the Vauxhall sporting lineup, because I think this perhaps opened the door to a whole different generation of Vauxhall customers who Vauxhall wouldn't have otherwise appealed to. It was sort of like perhaps a younger driver, somebody who wanted something sporting, yet Vauxhall hadn't been offering that. And now Vauxhall came into that market with something that really appealed and was up to date and modern and better than a lot of the competition.
Absolutely, and you can see the lineage actually really starts with this car, and then it goes through Mark II GTE, and then you go into the GSIs in the mid to late 90s, and then of course from the early 2000s you're into the VXR range. So you can, and then that goes right through pretty much up to date.
So this is perhaps the start of the modern Vauxhall era that we're still in.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, great. So this is the granddaddy of all of those cars.
Yes.
Right, come on then. This is a fairly small car. Let's go on to something slightly larger. So now, Simon, we come to the 1990s, and it's been just over 30 years since the Lotus Carlton came out, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So it would have, in the year of 2020, the year that everything got put on hold, it would have been celebrating its 30th birthday.
Yes, we had big plans for it. It was going to be at Silverstone Classic. It was going to be at Goodwood Festival of Speed. We had all manner of magazine articles lined up for it. Only a few of those have taken place because of COVID. So more's the pity. But nevertheless.
But now it's here.
Yes.
Up at Manor Park Classics, and hopefully, once restrictions relax a little bit, it'll be out and about and be seen, and people will be able to see it here as well. Now, this car is a very quick car, and it's a pretty big car as well. So it's bigger than your Sierra Cosworths and the like, and perhaps I would suggest, well, in fact, definitely, it's better appointed. Look inside here. You've got black leather. It's plush. It's puckered. It's deep. This is a very quick executive car.
And it would have been, when it was launched, it was the fastest production four-door saloon in the world.
Wow.
So 176 miles an hour was its conservative maximum speed.
Right.
Now, Vauxhall had to tone it down. Reality is that it was probably capable of a little bit more than that.
Okay.
But
why did Vauxhall have to tone this down?
Well, because it actually it elicited all sorts of tabloid headlines in the day about how irresponsible a mainstream manufacturer was to launch a car that could achieve such huge maximum speed.
And was Vauxhall irresponsible?
Well, no, it was deliberate. It was a deliberate ploy. We wanted to change our image. We wanted to get away from the rather grey and staid image that we had at the time, producing Vectras and Cavaliers and things like that.
Yeah.
And equally, we were owned by General Motors at the time. General Motors also owned Lotus.
Okay.
So you could see, and Lotus were cash starved at the time. They needed some more production. They needed some
perfect. Yeah,
so it was a perfect solution.
Where better to put their engines than in the Lotus Carlton?
So they took a basic Carlton, produced in Rüsselsheim.
Yeah.
They took the 3-litre engine, the 3-litre straight-six engine.
Yeah.
It was bored out to 3.6 litres.
Yes.
Addition of 2 turbochargers.
Yep. Rare at the time.
Rare at the time. And all of a sudden, you had 376 horsepower and aforementioned 176 miles an hour top speed. The cost, £48,000.
In 1990?
In 1990.
Blimey. £48,000.
Yeah. So
now, hold on. I remember buying a house in a reasonably nice area in 1997, and it was a 3-bedroom, semi-detached Victorian, long-length sort of villa, lovely house, nice long garden, and that was £72,000, and that's 7 years later. I have an idea that £48,000 would probably have been around about the price of that house in 1990. So this cost as much as a comfortable in a comfortable semi-detached house in a nice area.
But what you got for the money, though, I mean, it was fantastic. You had that performance. You had, as you just said, very, very plush interior, air conditioning.
It would have to be plush. I'd have to live in it.
Even a basic form of traction control, which was very ahead of its day at the time. 6-speed gearbox, 6-speed in 1990.
Actually, yeah.
I mean, it's quite something. And even now, it does the numbers. I mean, I've had this car up to its maximum speed at Bruntingthorpe.
Yeah.
And it'll still do it. This particular car is quite interesting. It's a very, very late model. It's towards the end of the production run. It's always been owned by us. So this was originally a press car.
Okay.
And then when it finished its production, its life as a press car, it was put onto the Heritage fleet, and we've had it ever since.
Well, it's in superb order. It really is, because just going from here and looking inside, I'm instantly in the early 90s. I think it's a superb machine. It's a great story, a brilliant tie-up with two GM-owned companies coming together to make one stonking car. And it's a shame that more of that doesn't happen nowadays.
Well, yes.
But wow, what a machine. Well, thank you for showing us through some of the Vauxhall Heritage collection that's kept here at Manor Park Classics, Simon. It has been wonderful to go from 1904 up to the early 90s and see the development. And of course, Vauxhall is still very much with us and producing cars. So in fact, the Heritage collection is still going to grow.
It will indeed. Yes.
I think that's an amazing thing, and long may it continue to. Can I have the Vauxhall 3098 to take home, please?
Oh, go on then.
Thank you.